Page 359, 1 Kings chapter 18, and there are two of us going to share the reading of it. Paper rustling everywhere, right with there, thank you. After a long time, in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. When Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs and valleys, and maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals." So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" "Yes," he replied. "Go tell your master, Elijah is here." "What have I done wrong," asked Obadiah, "that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord our God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. But I don't know where the Spirit of God may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each. I supplied them with food and water. And now you're telling me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. He will kill me." Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good."
Verse 25, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. "Go and look towards the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and looked. "There is nothing there," he said. 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." The 7th time the servant reported, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." So Elijah said, "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and, tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you both very much. In all my years of service in the church, there is one sin which I have come to fear above all others: certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. That's not my opinion. That's quotes from the fictional Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes in the recent film Conclave, which is a film that's obviously taken on a bit more intrigue in the past few weeks with all that's been going on. But his point in the film is that when people are too sure of what they believe about God and about faith, that leads to division and breakdown. By the way, I think probably be a good thing for us to be praying for the real process of conclave getting underway soon. Whatever else we might say, the next pope will be, I guess, the most significant spokesperson for Christianity in the world. Good to pray for that process. But I'm sure that the discussions that the real cardinals are going to be having will be much more nuanced than the ones in the film. But that quote that I read to you at the start is kind of the central message of the film. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. That's a very postmodern message, isn't it? We shouldn't have too much confidence in any one way of seeing things. And in some ways that's right. It's an ugly thing, isn't it, when someone is totally convinced of the truth of every opinion that they hold. And there are some things that it's good for us to sit loose to, and it is good for us to learn from other people. And certainty in a mathematical sense is kind of not what we're claiming as Christians. But the thing that was interesting about that quote is that the book of Kings seems to tell almost exactly the opposite story to Cardinal Lawrence in Conclave. As we heard earlier, we're jumping for these 3 weeks into the book of 1 Kings to look at the story of Elijah. But the book as a whole is one that tells the story of how everything fell apart for Israel. for God's people in the Old Testament. The book starts at the high point of the nation's history under King Solomon, and the people are united, all 12 tribes of Israel, all there, and there's unbelievable prosperity and success, and everything is amazing. And then the book tells the story of the decline and fall of Israel. The nation splits in two. 10 tribes go one way, 2 tribes go another. And then it ends with them being conquered and kicked out of the land that God had given them, the land that was so central to who they were. They're kicked out and they are trafficked into exile. And the thing that triggered all of that going wrong is not so much certainty, but in a sense, the thing that triggered it is uncertainty. It's the fact that they gradually lose confidence in the Lord, and they started kind of looking around for other options and other gods. And it divides them, and in the end, it defeats them. Because the Lord is not prepared to be treated as one amongst the gods. So it leads to defeat. The story of Kings is a tragedy. And a tragedy in the proper sense. A tragedy like the film Titanic is a tragedy, where there's really good things in it, but it ends with an iceberg, spoiler alert. It ends in disaster. And the Book of Kings is like that. There's great moments in the Book of Kings, but it's heading towards a disaster. And so in a way, in retelling the story of this tragedy, the book is almost coming to us and saying, well, let's not have your life be a tragedy too, as individuals, as a church. Let's not have it be a story full of good moments and high points, but ultimately that ends with an iceberg. Learn from this. So that's what we're going to try and do this evening. The story of Elijah is the story of God giving his people a chance to turn things around, giving them a chance, if you like, to miss the iceberg. And it's a great story. I hope you enjoyed it as Stephen and Noel were reading it to us. At the heart of it is verse 21. Maybe you'd have a look at that with me. Verse 21. This is Elijah's appeal to the people of God. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." In other words, he's saying, I don't want you sitting on the fence in relation to the Lord anymore. Some context. At this point, the people of Israel were under a terrible king called Ahab, and under his leadership, what they've done is they've brought back some of the pagan cults that people used to practice in the land before them, and particularly the worship of a god called Baal. And as with lots of the pagan gods, Baal was understood to have a speciality, and his speciality is rain and storms, and therefore crops. You need one to have the other, and particularly in that climate. And it's easy to see why that would be popular. Like everybody needs the rain. Everybody needs their crops to grow. Everybody needs a good harvest. And so you can see why people got into Baal. Even the people who, not sort of particularly religious or superstitious types. It only takes 1 or 2 bad harvests before you start thinking, well, I wonder if there's any extra options. I wonder if there's some little way that we can get ahead with the rains this year. And so the people have ended up looking to this God. It seems from verse 21 that they didn't intend to replace the Lord with Baal. It seems they weren't thinking, we'll get rid of the Lord and bring in this replacement, but rather it seems like they were just thinking something a bit more like, well, we don't want to be over dogmatic, there are some things that we really appreciate about the Lord, and there are some things that we really appreciate about Baal, and what's so wrong with us having both? And Elijah comes to them and says, okay, we're going to put this Baal to the test. And so these 3 chapters are a kind of showdown between the Lord and Baal. And round 1 in the showdown has already happened. So you remember that Baal is thought to be the god of rain and of storms. Well, have a look at chapter 17, verse 1. Before we had read, I suppose we had it read last week, didn't we? But chapter 17, verse 1. Now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." And then that is what happens. So Baal, the rain god, it turns out, doesn't actually control the rain. The Lord controls the rain. And we've already been told in the book of 1 Kings that one of the things that will make the Lord temporarily turn the rain off is the people sinning against him. And the point at which he will decide to sort of turn the stopcock back on again is as the people turn back to him. And at the end of chapter 18, that's exactly what's going to happen. We heard it read, there's going to be black clouds and a massive rainstorm. But lest there be any doubt about who made the rain come back on again, there's a showdown first. Elijah says, before that happens, before we turn the rain back on again, just to make sure you know you're absolutely certain who it is who's done this, we're going to see once and for all who the real God is. We're going to get rid of this uncertainty and fence sitting and force a decision. So that's what he'd said to them in verse 21, and they, it says, had nothing to say. Choose who you're going to follow, and they had nothing to say at that point. So Elijah sets up the contest, verse 22. I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us, let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I'll prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you can call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. We're happy with this contest. It's as though Elijah's saying, okay, Baal has struggled on the water front. Let's see how he gets on with fire. So the prophets of Baal go first. They don't sort of toss for it. Elijah says, no, you just go for it, you go first. And they choose their bull, and presumably they choose the most flammable looking bull of the two, and they get going on their rituals. Verse 26, they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us! From morning till noon. Imagine the poor things. Oh, Baal! 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 It's awkward already, isn't it? And I've done it 5 times. All morning, they just keep going and going and going. But there was no response. Nobody answered. They danced around the altar that they'd made, we're told. In fact, the author of Kings is obviously not very impressed by their dancing. It's literally, they limped around the altar. So if you've ever had your dancing described as limping, you're not being given a compliment there. But anyway, away they go. They keep shouting and they keep limping and they keep doing it. It gets towards lunchtime. And verse 27, Elijah's having a nice time, isn't he, at this point? Shout louder. Surely he's a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought. Or, give him the benefit of the doubt, perhaps he's busy. In fact, that's a nice euphemism in the NIV. Other translations have it. Perhaps he is relieving himself. Maybe that's the reason that as you shout, Baal, that nothing's happening. It's like when your housemate's in the queue for the shower, but you're in the bathroom still, and I'll be there, I'll be done in a minute. Maybe that's Baal. Maybe he's just not quite ready. Or maybe he's traveling. Did we get an out of office from Baal recently? I can't remember. When's he away? When's his holiday? It could be that. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. So Elijah's having a lovely time. But the thing that I think is really funny is that they don't say to him, oh, shut up, Elijah. Or they don't say to him, how dare you blaspheme the great God Baal. When he says shout louder, what do in verse 28? They shout it louder. So I love to think of, Elijah there saying, maybe you need to shout a bit louder. And they say, what a good idea. That must be it. We'll shout. So they do. Baal! 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 Oh, and then it stops being funny, doesn't it? In verse 28. Because as with so many pagan gods, they think, oh, maybe he's after our blood. He wants something from us, and we definitely want something from him, and so it gets bloody. On to verse 29. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying. You can imagine them panicking now until the time for the evening sacrifice, all day. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Elijah's turn. And he deliberately stacks all of the odds against the Lord. So we're told that he builds a stone altar, not very flammable, I think we can agree. He builds a stone altar. He digs a massive trench, arranges the sacrifice, pours loads of water all over it so that it's all absolutely soaking wet. And if you're not an outdoorsy person, soaking wet wood does not catch fire very well. I have an aunt and uncle who moved quite recently to a house that had a log burner inside and a canal at the end of the garden. And my uncle occasionally would see bits of wood floating past on the canal and think, well, that'd do quite nicely for the log burner. And so he'd sort of like paddle over to it and get the piece of wood. And once it's been drying out for about 25 years, it'll be ready for him to burn. Wet wood doesn't burn, but Elijah absolutely soaks the wood. So he's stacking all of the odds against the Lord. It's as though it's, if you'd arranged the penalty shootout, the goal that the Lord is shooting into, he says, well, we make it a bit smaller, a little bit smaller still until, it's sort of A4 paper size. Now that's a fair contest. And then he prays, verse 37. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. And then the fire fell. What a moment it must have been. Can you imagine it? It's serious fire. Not only is the offering burned, but the whole altar, the stone altar, vaporized. Imagine it. Imagine what it must have sounded like. And then imagine the silence after it happens. The fire falls. And then everyone looks at each other and think, have we really just seen that? And then they all burst out, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. There's not much uncertainty left now, is there? When Elijah had asked them at the start, if the Lord's God, serve him. If Baal's God, serve him. They weren't quite sure. They didn't really say anything. Now they're sure. So that is the showdown. What has it proved? What's it proved about the Lord in relation to Baal and therefore in relation to every other god? It's proved that he is stronger, better, stranger, and truer. He's stronger. He wins. The Lord is the one who can actually control stuff. You see, this is why the fire contest comes in between the rain stopping and the rain starting again, to prove that actually it was the Lord who was in control of the rain anyway. He's the one in control of the weather, and therefore he's the one who the people should have been asking to give them rain. He's the one that they should have been thanking when it did rain. He's the one they should have been praising when the harvest came in, all the rest of it. He wins. He's stronger. He absolutely wipes the floor with Baal. It's embarrassing. And he is therefore stronger than anything else that you or I might look to in the moments where we think, I'm not really sure if God is strong enough. How easy to think that I am secure because I am on the property ladder, or I will be happy when that relationship goes the way I want it to go. But it's the Lord who actually runs things. It's the Lord who's stronger. He's in control. He's God. He is stronger than anything else, and therefore he's the one to look to. He's stronger. He's better, by which I mean he's more good than anything else. It's horrific what the followers of Baal think that they need to do for him. But he will only give them stuff when they give him stuff. And he asks them to shed their blood for him. None of that with the Lord. None of that with him. He asks us to entrust ourselves to him in response to his goodness. But he doesn't demand a price from us. He doesn't crush us. And then you think, well, what else is that true of besides the Lord? Live for your work, and it'll just make you work harder and harder and harder and harder until you're crushed and exhausted. Live for your spouse or your prospective spouse, and you'll only be as joyful as the marriage is functional. But the Lord is a good God. He's kind, and he's generous, he's gracious. What other gods, whether they're pagan ones or secular ones, what other things that we live for are like that, are good? Stronger, he's better. He's stranger. And what I mean by this is that with the pagan gods like Baal, there's at least a bit of a kind of, a kind of vending machine system. So that's the thinking anyway, that you put in what they want and you'll get out what you want. Offer your sacrifice and the harvest will come. And the harvest doesn't come, probably need a bigger sacrifice. You want a better harvest, bigger sacrifice. Put the hours in, you'll get the pay rise. Give us your data and your attention, and we will give you dopamine. It's the way that it works, isn't it? We put things in, we get things out. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. How it works with Baal, how it works with almost everything. But the Lord isn't like that. He's got his own purposes. He can't be manipulated. There's no thing that we can do that will force him to do something else. Therefore, sometimes he'll do things that look kind of unexpected to us. He's not going to be tied down by anything other than his own free choice. And you see that in the passage. Sometimes Elijah prays to him and he answers straight away, like with the fire. Other times, like in verse 43, he makes Elijah wait. Other times, he doesn't answer his prayers at all. In the next chapter, Elijah prays that the Lord would take his life. And not only does the Lord not do it in that moment, the Lord never does it. Elijah doesn't die. He's carried off in a chariot. So the Lord is stranger and unexpected than these prophets of Baal because he's real. And he's the sovereign. He's in charge. And then the fourth thing this proves is that he is truer. The reason that Baal doesn't answer is that he's not there. Look again at verse 29 with me, or just the end of verse 29. They do their frantic prophesying, but there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. That's not just a comment about what happened on Mount Carmel. They prayed and then they didn't see anything happen. That is a comment on the whole of reality. Nobody paid attention. There was nowhere in the heavenly places or on the earth where anyone was listening because Baal is not there. They shouted and shouted to no one. Because there is only one God, and to look to anything other than him, to hope that help might come from anywhere other than him, is shouting into the void. It's like wondering if Baal is on the toilet. He's truer. Stronger, better, stranger, truer. And the people of Israel saw that, and they think, well, what are they thinking in verse 39? They're thinking, oh my goodness, what have we been doing? The Lord, he is God. Baal isn't the Lord. What? We've been sitting on the fence when it's so clear cut. The Lord is God. And at that moment, they're ready for the rain to come back because they know who'll be sending it. And they've turned back to him. Now you might be thinking, well, this is a great story, but it's all a bit remote, isn't it? Because I don't worship Baal. I don't sort of worship any gods that particularly I need to stop worshipping. And even if I did worship some other gods and need to turn away from them, then no spectacular demonstrations have been shown to me of the fact that the Lord is God. He's not quite gone to the lengths to persuade me that he did the people on this day. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that we don't worship other gods. Because every one of us has this sort of category of things where we think the things in this category are the things that are going to make my life worth living. They are the things that are going to satisfy me. My life does depend on them. And as we said, it's not as though the people of Israel thought of themselves as rejecting the Lord. In their thinking, they still had the Lord, but they just had a few other big things going on in life that were equally as important to them as the Lord was. That feels more like me. I don't know about you. Perhaps you're thinking, I am a Christian, but I've got to do well in these exams, or else how is my life going to end up on a trajectory to success? And so, just the Christian thing can just go on the back burner for a little while, can't it? I do God on Sundays very thoroughly, but then on Monday I've just got some other things that I need to think about. And it's as though the Lord says, well, am I God or not? Can I be trusted or not? By all means, if your career is God, or if marriage, or if sex, or if money, or your reputation is God, by all means serve it. But if the Lord is God, serve him. All in. That's what Elijah is calling for. Because actually, the ultimate demonstration that the Lord is God has happened. It's not just this day. The Lord still has some powerful evidence to point to that the Lord, he is God. And he gave that evidence not on this hill, but on another hill, where he laid on an altar not the second best bull, but his only son on the cross, and where the ferocious heat of God's judgment fell on him, and where with all of the odds stacked against him, he won the greatest triumph that there has ever been. He defeated all the powers that stand against him, and then 3 days later, raised from the dead, vindicated. He is God. And it's as we look at that we see the evidence that the Lord is God, that he is the one to trust. Jesus' death, Jesus' resurrection, that is what shows us the Lord is God. He's the one to be trusted and served and feared, and to give ourselves to wholly, not wavering between two opinions. So I wonder what you are holding back from him today. I wonder what is the area of your life that you're not keen to let him into. Because the thing is, if we're holding something back from the Lord is giving it to someone else or something else, saying something else, someone else would be a better God of this part of my life than the Lord. And the message of 1 Kings 18 is no, it wouldn't, no. It wouldn't. Because he's better. So Elijah says to us, how long will you waver between two opinions? Serve the Lord. Trust him. But just as we finish, what does it look like to be all in? Okay, I've got to not waver, I've got to serve the Lord. Message understood. But what? Because if it means I've got to look like Elijah, that feels like quite a lot, to be honest. Confronting kings, fire and stuff. Is that what I've got to do? What does it look like for me to serve him? Well, this is where the first 15 verses of the passage are such an encouragement. The little story of Obadiah, which we've got no time to look at really, but have another read of this when you get home. Obadiah is such a hero, I think. If you're looking for a Bible hero, have a look at him. Verse 3 says that he was Ahab's, he's the terrible king, he's Ahab's palace administrator, but that he's a devout believer in the Lord. So senior civil servant in Ahab's kingdom, and a believer in the Lord who Ahab hates. Presumably, that means that every day he's making a lot of quite complicated choices about what serving the Lord looks like in his context. I get the sense from reading his story that he isn't the most level-headed, because when Elijah tells him to go and tell Ahab that he wants a chat, I think Obadiah really panics in verse 9 to 14. I imagine he says this very quickly and sort of, this is a terrible idea. And it's totally understandable in the circumstances, but not necessarily inspiring. Another reason why I love him, really. Verse 12 tells us he has served the Lord since his youth, so he's been a Christian since he was a teenager. So there's lots that's sort of relatable about him. But then look at verse 4. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. So he's taken an incredible risk to serve the Lord in just hidden, quiet ways. Jezebel's the queen, and she's been carrying out this campaign of killing the Lord's prophets. And I don't know how it happened. Did Obadiah overhear the plan being discussed in the palace? Did he have a couple of caves marked as safe houses, just in case it ever came to this? Has he been smuggling his lunch out of Ahab's palace canteen to feed these prophets? We don't know. But this is a guy who is all in for the Lord. Doesn't look very much like Elijah. But because he's convinced that the Lord is God, he goes for quiet, complicated, risky faithfulness. It's not spectacular. It's not full of confidence and bravado. It's not memorable. But he is confident in his God, and he is going to serve him with his life. And so what about us? If the Lord is God, serve him. Let me pray for us. Lord, you are God, and demonstrated it to us. And so we pray that you'd help us to be those who place our trust and faith wholly in you and who serve you wholeheartedly in response. Keep us from wavering, keep us from having sort of gods on the side that we look to for bits and pieces that we don't think we can get from you. Please help us on the strength of the evidence given to us here in 1 Kings and given to us at the cross and resurrection to put our trust in you. And we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.